organizations, associations, advocates. There's a list of them on hopefully the document that you have. You can see we're very well represented. What we'll do is we'll go around and, we need to cut off at 7. This cuts off at 7, but I don't want to cut you off by any means. If you'll get a few minutes at the end to wrap things up and say whatever you need to say that you might not have gotten into the questions, but we will probably try to get through the questions as quickly as we can.
I respect a well-run meeting that ends in an hour. I'm all about it. So.
All right, let's go ahead and we'll go ahead and start with Dr. Oding. And if you want to do a quick introduction, and then we'll get started with the questions after we do the introductions.
Thanks for being here, giving us a chance to talk. I'm Margaret Oding. I'm a pediatrician. I'm representing the Iowa Academy of Pediatrics. And I'm a pediatrician here in Iowa City. I run a clinic for uninsured kids, which leads me to, it's called Healthy Kids, it serves Johnson County. And so that leads into my question, which is that over the past few decades, we've expanded Medicaid and CHIP, which has really, really helped with children's health care. That there's still about 5% of kids in the U.S., 3% in Iowa, up to 10% in Johnson County who have no health insurance. And so wondering if you have some policy thoughts on how to expand this even further. Some states allow all children, regardless of immigration status, to have public insurance. The states have different limits on their CHIP programs and Medicaid programs. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, thank you, and thanks for the work that you do. I mean, that's really important. So, first of all, just want to say, I grew up in a family, neither of my parents graduated high school. I grew up in a mobile home, and I was, I think, one of those uninsured kids when I was younger. My dad actually lost his insurance. He got sick with emphysema and had it for about 10 years, and just when he got really, really sick, they canceled his health insurance. And at that point, it got really bad because we were literally choosing between, putting groceries in the cart or filling his prescriptions, or maybe only filling half the prescription, or, all those kinds of things. And I hear these stories all throughout this district from people. So, I know what it means for a family not to have health insurance and how bad things can get. And I know we're talking about kids here, but I mean, it's everyone, and kids, I mean, a lot of times kids are, tend to be a little healthier than older people, but things happen. And those regular checkups are so important to keep from getting into things that maybe could be avoided and all of that, right? And so it's really important for the long-term health of people to make sure that we're getting the kids insured, really early. So it's a huge priority for me, we have made some progress with CHIP and with Medicaid expansion, but there's a lot more to do. And so, just a couple things that come to mind. One is, there are people and kids who are eligible for Medicaid who don't know that they're eligible. We need to make sure that we're educating people, getting that out there. The other thing is, sadly in Iowa, we know that a lot of people have been thrown off of the Medicaid rolls because of not, complying with complicated, burdensome kind of requirements of, doing paperwork and different things. And we know that sometimes people don't understand what they're supposed to do. We know that it's kind of an onerous process in the sense that there are pretty strict time limitations on when you have to respond to certain inquiries from the government, or you get thrown off. I think that was a mistake. I don't think that Iowa should have done that. I think it's wrong, and I would like to see us return back to the old system that didn't require all of that. I think if you are eligible, you should be on Medicaid, and I don't think that we should be, kind of looking for opportunities to throw people off of Medicaid. That's what I think. So I think that we ought to go, back to that. I also think that we should be considering a public option generally. I think, one problem is that there are people who are eligible for Medicaid, and then others who just miss being eligible for Medicaid. I think that in general, both with kids and with others, is a big gap right now. You have people who can get on Medicaid, and then you have that next level where they just have a little too much to be on Medicaid, but they still really struggle with making ends meet, with, you know, affording health insurance and all that. So I would like to see us really address that next step. And so I think a public option or something of that sort is really important. You know, we've done it now a little bit on the senior side with some of the prescription drug measures that have been taken, and I'm really happy to see that. I'm strongly supportive of that. But I think we kind of need to do something a little similar for our kids, and to come in, you know, where that group that maybe isn't eligible for Medicaid can get some kind of support. So those are some of the things that I would really like to see us do, and I think it's really important that we do it. I'd be strongly supportive of doing that in Congress.
Thank you. We'll go to Hannah for the next question on school readiness.
Like I said, I'm Hannah Ricker. I'm with the Iowa Women's Foundation, doing our program work, so including our advocacy as I'm hopping into that. So in Iowa, we're looking at 74% of our children under the age of 5 with both parents in the workforce. And even on full-time wages, many still struggle to cover the cost of childcare. And you know, you look at childcare professionals themselves being among the lowest paid in our economy. And often parents are required to return to work very shortly after having a child in order to afford their bills. So recognizing the mismatch between wages and the cost of care, and understanding how important early education programs are for developing lifelong learners. Congress and the President have authorized some tax deductions and subsidies for low-wage workers, which was great progress. However, they're inadequately scaled to ensure affordable quality childcare for everyone in the workforce. So childcare advocates and champions in Congress have called for $40 billion in additional investments in childcare, preschool, Head Start. And studies show that such investments have a 4 to 9 times per dollar return on investment, and obviously that leads to increased earnings and employment, and just ultimately creates a more productive workforce to power our economy.
Yeah.
So my question is, with all that lead up,
What do you do about it?
is, you know, what policies and programs will you support? It was, my question was just what policies and programs will you support so that all children start school prepared for success, and that, you know, families have access to these programs?
Absolutely. So, gosh, I have so many strong feelings about this. So, those early formative years are so important. You can't get them back. And in terms of emotional support, in terms of learning, I mean, that is an area we really need to support more. I think it's critical. You know, when we look at things like, you know, literacy levels and, you know, math and later measures, we always think of what people are doing or what those kids are doing in, you know, middle school or high school, and when they take those tests. So much is happening at these very early stages. So I really want to focus on that. I was very, very fortunate. You know, my mom was actually a daycare worker, part-time, and she loved kids and loved working with kids. And so when I was really little, she spent a lot of time with me, teaching me to read and, you know, all of that. And she taught me how to pretend to read before I could read. And so we would play jokes on people and say, hey, you know, they would pretend that I was reading some complicated nursery rhyme, you know, when there was no way I could possibly have memorized it. I mean, I learned it to read it, but I had memorized it. You know, I think that kind of early attention with kids, teaching them the joy of learning, and how, you know, getting them ready to read, things like that is just critical. So I am strongly supportive of all that. Head Start, absolutely. You know, one of the things that I strongly disagree with my opponent on is that she did vote for a cut to education funding that would have included a huge cut to Head Start, and also would have cut 145,000 teacher jobs across the country. I cannot get behind anything like that. I mean, we really, I mean, if we're not taking care of our kids, then, you know, so I think that absolutely supporting Head Start, I think that it'll just, as you said, will bring benefits all down the line, in terms of, you know, later dropout levels and graduation levels and math and reading and all that, emotional well-being, you know, all of it. So I think that is, you know, something that just, it just pays more and more dividends all down the line, both to the individual, to the family, to society. So yeah, I am all in for that. As I said, my mom was a daycare worker part of the time, and I would go visit her in the Montessori and take care and everything, and saw the stuff that happens there, and it's good stuff, So I think that's really important. I will say in Iowa, we have been saying this for some time, and when I was in the state legislature, there were bills introduced multiple times, to try to deal with childcare. I know I visited here in Johnson County some of the work that's happened with trying to make childcare affordable and accessible. I visited to talk to people and see, what we need to do to provide more providers, that kind of thing. And in the legislature, we worked on that, and I felt like the approach there, unfortunately, was to do the absolute bare minimum, just to barely scrape the tip of the iceberg, and then say, we did it, we passed a child care bill. And it's not even close to enough. And so one of the things I will say, apart from all of the things I just mentioned about children and the importance of doing this for children and for families, business and economic development depends on that early child care and all of that. I have traveled this entire district, Southeast Iowa, and it is one of the things I hear the most from small business owners and from people doing, in chambers of commerce and things like that, who, are looking for economic development. They want to get people into the workforce, but people are struggling with childcare. They're struggling with finding it, and they're struggling with paying for it. And so, we can do a lot more. I think that this is the kind of strategic investment that just brings benefits through economic development, through later growth for the child, for families, all of that. And so I think it's a really smart investment for us to make as a state and a country.
Excuse me, thank you. Jennifer, your turn now. I want to ask the question around school success.
Yes, so Jennifer Banta, I am with United Way of Johnson and Washington counties, but I'm representing United Ways of Iowa right now. So we value education. We're in Iowa City. We definitely value education. The U.S. was once one of the first nations to have universal public education, and obviously had the highest literacy rates in the world for a long time. But unfortunately, all that has changed, right? So our high school graduation rates now rank well below many of our competitors and partners around the world. So I feel like the most important detail here is a child's zip code should not determine their success in life, especially in education and what schools that they go to, but too often it does. So while states and communities are the primary funder of K-12 education, the federal government plays a key role in some key areas like special education and for supplemental funding for schools with high proportions of low-income students, which unfortunately that's growing across the country. Right. So can you just give us an idea about what your thoughts are around public policy that you would support to ensure that all students are receiving an equitable and wonderful education?
Yeah. So, I mentioned a minute ago some of my background. When I was younger, as I said, when my dad wasn't able to work, he got sick, they canceled his health insurance. We lost everything. And so it was public education that really lifted me out of poverty and gave me opportunities that I never could have imagined. And I say this when I'm talking, and it's absolutely true, that it is fair to say that everything I've ever done, every opportunity I've ever had is because of public education and because of public school teachers. And I think that we have lost sight of that a bit in the country for sure, but in this state also. I have been devastated to see what has happened to public education in Iowa. The disinvestment that we're seeing, the lack of support for our teachers, lack of respect for our teachers, just the $1 billion that we're putting into private school vouchers to invest $1 billion with a B of taxpayer dollars going to fairly well-off families as an incentive to take their kids out of public schools and send them to private schools. That huge investment is serving a very tiny fraction of kids in Iowa, where the vast majority of our kids are still in public schools that are underfunded. I think that's tragic. I think it's wrong, and I think it's sad, you know. And so, for me, I am a huge supporter of our public schools. I think we've got to get back to that. We used to be #1 in the country in Iowa in public education. We were a destination for people to move here, bring their kids here, to be educated here. And I hear that when I'm talking to people all throughout. That pride is so palpable. People felt that, but that has now been replaced with a deep sadness for what we've done in Iowa. And so there's so many people who really want to get back to that. So I would work hard for that. You know, you're right, a lot of that happens at the state level, but there are things that we can do at the federal level. And so the thing I've really been thinking about that I would like to push for in Congress is, you know, we just did this major focus on infrastructure, really, you know, investing in our infrastructure. I want to see us do something like that for our public schools throughout the country, a very concerted effort to invest in our schools, in teacher recruitment and salaries, but also we need to modernize some of our school buildings. A lot of them don't have air conditioning. We know that it's getting hotter. That's going to become an even bigger problem. And I also want to see us focus on what I'm seeing in Iowa, which is unique challenges faced by small town and rural schools. There are very unique challenges I've been hearing from people, you know, and I've met with a lot of teachers, parents, school board members, principals, you know, who are largely Republican. A lot of them, you know, they live in rural parts of Iowa and they just tend to be Republican. They are devastated by what is happening to our schools. They are so upset about it because they are so committed to the kids. And so I think that we can work together on this. I think we need to listen to the people in those small towns and rural areas about what's really happening there. But there are some things that happen in those schools that are a bit more challenging in some ways than are true in our towns. For example, just one of the things that just came up is mental health. Right? So you know, most educators, if you talk to them, they want someone to help with mental health issues with their kids in the schools. But in rural and small town schools, you know, they can't pay a full-time mental health counselor. And it's so far to drive from school to school in these small towns and rural areas, so they'd like to share one maybe with another school, but it's a long drive. They're just, you know, particular things like that. Or when they do have a kid who's really in crisis, the distance that they have to go to get that kid the help that they need. You know, we know that mental health in Iowa is also a big problem, and we don't have enough psychiatric beds or professionals to deal with that. So, you know, these are just unique things that happen in these schools, and I think that we need to pay some real attention to what's happening there. You know, I know that there's been a lot of, you know, emphasis on things like inner city schools and stuff, which is great. We need to do that too. But I think that this is also a challenge that I would like to work on. And I think that we need a major kind of concerted effort to deal with that. I would like to see us offer school lunch free to all kids. I think that is something that it has widespread support. I've talked to so many teachers of all political backgrounds and parties who believe that this is a really good thing to do. I remember when I was growing up, you know, the choke sandwich, they used to call it, the peanut butter sandwich when you didn't bring your money for lunch, you know, and even that was embarrassing for kids, right? A lot of kids, they won't even do the reduced lunch because they're singled out, you know, and so they don't eat. And if they can't eat, they can't learn. And so, you know, I would like to see us really look at that as well. As I mentioned before, one of the things that really concerns me about what Marionette Miller-Meeks has done is she has voted to cut education funding at the federal level. I want to see us invest in our kids and our schools.
I know I'm not supposed to have any commentary and breaking my own rule, but my own school district has implemented free school lunch for everybody and free school supplies for elementary school kids. So just kind of a cool thing that they've just recently done.
Well, and I'll just say I hear a lot about school lunches throughout the district. A lot of these schools started offering the lunches during the pandemic, and the drive-through lunches, and they gave so many meals. You can't imagine the joy on these school administrators' faces when they tell me how many kids they served. They're so happy to know that they were able to serve this many kids. And so, and they learned that they can do that. This is something we can do. During COVID, we learned that. We learned some lessons. And that's one of them. And I think that we're starting to see people come out of that saying, hey, wait, that was a really good thing that we did. Glad COVID isn't what it was, right? But maybe we can take some things away from that and learn something from it. So I would love to see us do that.
Thanks. I'll ask the next question. I'm Sheila Hansen with Common Good, Iowa. I'm going to ask a question on safety and permanence. When all children don't have equal opportunity for healthy growth and development, we put our futures at risk. And we have lots of research now that talks about toxic stress, resilience, ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. And it really talks about the importance of family stability and healthy child development. Most parents can provide that. However, we do know that some families struggle for various reasons. It might be poverty, it might be instability, mental health, substance abuse, whatever that issue may be. So one of the systems that we have is the foster care system in Iowa. And just as a side note too, I am a foster parent, have been for several years now. It's been a joy, and it's also been a challenge, but I do appreciate being a foster parent. If children are not kept safe in their homes or provided permanency through adoption or stable and nurturing care, they're at an increased risk of school failure. Human trafficking, we know, can happen, especially here in Iowa, this corridor that we're in now. Health problems and homelessness as adults. So what policies will you support to keep children safe in their homes and communities and protect them from abuse, neglect, and trauma?
Yeah, I mean, in short, all of them. I mean, we have to keep our kids safe. That's just first and foremost. It's really key. I mean, you have to start initially with that physical safety, and then we build out from there, right? But first and foremost, we have to make sure that our kids are physically safe. It's complicated, obviously. It's a really hard thing, to take children out of their home, right? And put them in foster care. And so, we do have to be very careful about that and mindful about all of the different elements of that. And it's a weighty decision. And so I think that's right. But obviously, it needs to happen in a lot of circumstances when those kids aren't safe. So, and we need to have the resources and the support to make the foster system work. I think that's really critical. So yes, I fully support that. I think we also, I've heard a lot from schools, teachers, principals, things like that. One of the biggest challenges for them is how to interface with the family, whether it's a foster family or the natural family, just to work with them to get the kid into school. Sometimes kids just aren't coming to school, or and that's a complex thing for schools to have to deal with too. Is they can't teach the kids if they're not in school, but how do you deal with the myriad of issues that you just talked about, whether it's substance abuse in the home or whether it's something else. Poverty, not understanding, lack of awareness, and so I think that there's a whole set of issues that we have to do there. But I think it starts with a commitment to making sure that kids are safe. That's got to be the first and foremost thing that we look at, and making sure that there are adequate resources for our foster care system, for our adoption, all of those kinds of things. And so I think that we have to start with that and be fully committed to supporting that.
Thank you. Our next question will be by John, and it's on basic needs.
Thank you. Hi, Christina.
Hi.
I'm John Bowler, Executive Director of the Coralville Community Food Pantry, and also a board member with the Iowa Hunger Coalition, who I'm representing today. Appreciate your thoughts earlier on universal free school meals. That does come up in my question, but thank you again. So every American deserves the opportunity to thrive and provide for their household. Scholars from both the left and the right have called for reducing child poverty as a core strategy to assure the country's future prosperity. So things like the Earned Income Tax Credit, Child Tax Credit, and Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, or SNAP, are the primary tools to reduce child poverty, as well as food insecurity, and they're very effective in doing so. Given their limits, we still see that 1 in 6 U.S. children remain in poverty, and double that still live in families that, although above the official poverty line, are still just getting by, still struggling. During the pandemic, there were supports in place, such as the expansion of the child tax credit, which cut child poverty in half, and, I didn't know this, helped 90% of families with children meet their day-to-day needs. Childhood food insecurity was also further reduced during the pandemic thanks to SNAP emergency allotments, universal free school meals, and pandemic EBT, which has become summer EBT and also now Sunbucks. With these opportunities no longer available, more families are struggling to make ends meet, and food banks and food pantries are seeing record-breaking numbers of Iowans turning to them for assistance. So my question, if elected, what policies will you support to ensure that families have the resources to meet their child's basic needs and to invest in their future?
Yeah. Wow, the child tax credit has been incredible. To take, I mean, it's rare that you can find one policy initiative that would cut child poverty in half, that would have that kind of seismic effect on children and families. You know, it's pretty incredible. So I believe we should extend it. I think we should expand it. I fully support that. And as you mentioned, one of the other things that's really important right now that I'm working on and talking to people about a lot is to lower costs for families, right? I mean, we've gone through this period now of some inflation. It seems to be mercifully, reducing just a bit. We hope we're not out of the woods yet, but I think that would cut child poverty and also just lower kind of costs, or allow families to kind of absorb some of those costs and work on that and manage things for themselves, and I think that, there's obviously, and I'm not going to get into that here, but obviously there's been a lot of talk about, reproductive freedom and issues around that, and a lot of talk about, people not having children, and we need to encourage people to have children. Let's make it easier and more affordable for people to have children if they want to have children. How about that? So I am really supportive of the child tax credit. I think it's fantastic. I think we need to do more of it. I was so disappointed when Representative Miller Meeks voted against extending the child tax credit. I don't understand that, especially when you look at the district that we're in. Look, this district is not a lot of wealthy families. This district is not full of corporate CEOs and billionaires. This is a lot of hardworking families who are really trying to get by, who love their children and want to care for them and are struggling to do that. So I think that we can extend and expand the child tax credit. I also was very disappointed. I'm saying that word a lot today, and I'm sorry, but it's just what it is. When Kim Reynolds said that she wouldn't take the summer funds to feed hungry kids over the summer, again, mind-boggling to me. I'm glad to hear that she's doing something, and that's good, I suppose, better than not doing anything. But I think that we need to feed our kids. I think we need to feed our kids. Does that make me crazy? I don't know. I think we need to feed our kids, and we need to be taking those federal funds and using them effectively for the kids in Iowa, right? That's what they're there for. And so the child tax credit is just a huge win, I think, for everybody. And I think things like the summer food funding, all of that kind of stuff, the EBT, all of that, I think is really, really important. These are, we're talking today a lot of these, and I really appreciate all of the advocacy that you're doing. I'm just gonna say, none of what we're talking about should be controversial. I don't think any of it should be partisan. I don't. you know, when you talk about, just look at, there are a lot of things out there we can debate about, you know, these are really basic fundamental things in terms of taking care of children who cannot take care of themselves and just helping them to get a decent start in life. We're not talking about giving people the sun and the moon. We're not talking about, you know, handing out, you know, just all kinds of money to people, you know, who don't want to work or this or that. These are kids that we're talking about. They can't fend for themselves, and they deserve a decent start in life. So, you know, for me, none of this is controversial. You know, I would love to see the school lunches. I want to see that summer money. It's not a huge amount of money anyway in the summer. It's $40 a month, right? $120 over a summer. You know, that's not a lot. And so I would like to see us do that in Iowa, and I would definitely like to see us go with the child tax credit.
Now, Jillian, we have 2 more questions left. Jillian's going to talk about child and family workforce.
I'm Jillian Harrington. I'm the Executive Director for the Iowa Association for the Education of Young Children, or Iowa AEYC. Most of the programs that we have support people who work in childcare or early childhood education. And as Hannah mentioned earlier, about the 74% of parents have working children with children under 6. Iowa does lead the nation typically in that number. You mentioned the word infrastructure earlier, and the rural communities, and Iowa does have a childcare and direct support service infrastructure breakdown that costs Iowa a lot of money, specifically in childcare, because that's my area. Iowa loses $1 billion a year in breakdowns of childcare issues, as in revenue losses and things like that. So it's a very expensive breakdown in that infrastructure. In addition to what parents and communities can provide, children need all the teachers and the direct care providers and everybody that you mentioned earlier to provide care, mental health professionals, things like that. If elected, what policies will you support to ensure the workforce needed to support children's well-being, childcare workers, direct community, all of them are valued and supported?
Yeah. You know, as you were speaking, I remember this thing that happened when I was younger. So when I had my daughter as a baby, I was about to go back to work, and I was also supposed to go on vacation. We were planning to go on vacation, and I hadn't found her childcare yet. I was looking high and low all over. I had visited several places. Nobody had an opening. You know, a few places I went to were very understaffed, and they couldn't take, you know, and it was so hard, right? And you're already struggling with, I'm about to go back to work and leave my baby somewhere. And I mean, there's all this emotional stuff to it, you know, and then you can't find a place, and it was just so hard. And I found out from somewhere that there was one spot left at this one place across town. And so I called them up and I said, I'm on my way, like, you know, and so I went over there, and I missed my flight to go on vacation. I just totally missed it. You know, I couldn't make it, but I was getting that spot, you know, because it was this good place. I heard good things about the person. And so I know what a crazy thing it is to try to find childcare, to pay for childcare, you know, all of it. And so, so for me, I get this, and I've also dealt with the other side of having an elderly parent. My in-laws, my husband's parents, you know, recently passed away. You know, we had someone coming in for them, and you know, trying to find that direct support, and that's hard too. Finding a good fit, finding someone who's able to come for the amount of time that you need, and then the cost of it. You know, we have many people in that sandwich generation, right, who are taking care of children, taking care of aging parents. And it's real, and it's tough, and then that becomes a workforce issue, right? Because if you're somebody who needs to provide some care to your parents, and childcare is expensive, you're like, well, I'll just stay home. I don't join the workforce, even if I'd like to work, you know. And so I think that is a whole set of issues, and it is, as you just said, I think of childcare and those kinds of things as a form of infrastructure. You know, they are the basic needs that we have to meet so that people can go and do. Just as people need to have a good road to drive to work, they need to have childcare so that they can leave their home and go to work. So all of that is I think just, for me, just treated as kind of basic infrastructure. And again, as a really good investment. You know, I am not a person who thinks that, just as some people want to say, throwing money at a problem is always the answer, right? Just throwing more, I mean, you hear that a lot. Oh, you can't just throw money at a problem, you know, and government shouldn't solve everything. And I agree, government can't solve every problem, right? And I'm not talking about wasteful spending, but I am talking about smart and strategic investments. And I think that there are some critical things, and I include the things we're talking about here in them, that we have to do to keep our business and our economic development and our workforce going. And I think that these are pretty fundamental to that. So I would really support that.
We have one last question. It's on sustainable financing, and that's from Mike.
Hi, Mike Owen, Deputy Director of Common Good Iowa. I think that your last answer was a good segue to this question. Everything you're talking about here are things that have been discussed here today, are investments that cost money. So what are the steps you would take to make sure that these proposals are financially sustainable? And specifically, what would you do regarding the Trump tax cuts of 2017? As you may know, there was a House Ways and Means Committee hearing at the State Fair last week where they invited only people who supported these things. And so there wasn't another side heard. Do you have a different position?
Maybe. So I think that we need to step back and just look at our tax system holistically, you know, without kind of talking about any particular, I think, because what I think is that corporations and the ultra wealthy need to pay their fair share. And the fact is, our tax system right now is such that, and I've done the research on this, you know, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, their tax rate is about 0.5% to 1% because of all the loopholes, all the exceptions, you know, all of that they get. Most of us in this room are paying a tax rate that's about 40 times that. Just regular, hardworking, middle class, you know, and that is not right. And in the meantime, you have people who are struggling with childcare, struggling with all these things. And we keep talking about a workforce shortage. You know, you keep hearing Governor Reynolds talk about workforce shortage. You know, I don't think they could be making the workforce shortage worse if they tried. You know, because they are, all of the burdens are being borne by middle class, by hardworking families. You know, we need to reallocate that. People at the very, very top, and where we literally are now talking about 100 millionaires and billionaires with their mega yachts and, you know, whatever, right? I mean, they need to be paying their fair share so that, you know, we have an economy that works for everybody. And this is an economic issue. I mean, you have to have buyers and sellers, right? If we have corporations out there selling lots of goods and you don't have anybody who can buy their products, that is not going to make the economy work, right? So we need to have people who have some income, who can spend, who can go on vacation and go out to restaurants, and who can buy the products that are being manufactured here in the United States, and you know, and support those workers and wages. So it all works together. And so I think that we can develop an economy that works for everybody, but it does start with having a fair tax system. And it really, frankly, burns me up. It's one of the things that upsets me the most, is, you know, like my opponent and some others who are, you know, say that they want to keep cutting tax rates for the ultra wealthy, and then they want to do things like privatize Social Security, raise the retirement age. They don't want to invest in childcare. They don't want to do these things. And it's just a very, very lopsided system, and it is not a good economic system. It isn't going to cause our economy to grow and flourish. So, you know, you've got to look at the big picture. You've got to step back and develop a system that's fair and that works for everybody, and that actually grows our economy and encourages innovation in the country.
Well, excuse me, thank you. We know that promise it quick. You did really well in those 40 minutes or so that we threw a lot of information at you, and our coalition really does appreciate you taking the time to meet with us. We do take this information and share it with our different organizations. We will ask them to put it on Facebook. I'll give you a chance to respond to it. Ask them to put it on their Facebook pages also. But and just for your information, we are in the process of working with your opponent to get a meeting set up to ask the same questions. You were the first to respond, so we do appreciate that a lot, and so maybe this will give some pressure for the other campaign to respond and meet with us and do the same thing. But I want to give you a few minutes. You have the time you need to wrap up. Any last minute comments that you have, or anything that you didn't get in, or you thought about, oh yeah, I probably should have mentioned this to this group.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mainly I just want to say thank you. I mean, thank you for the opportunity to come and talk to you, but most especially for the work that you're doing. I mean, every single one of you is doing really good things in the community for people who need it. And so I just want to say thank you for the work that you're doing. It's really important for our kids, for our families. And so, I just want you to know that I am here for you. One of the interesting things about doing the kind of thing I'm doing is, a lot of people are like, oh, wow, you're running for Congress. It feels like such a big thing. It really isn't in that sense. You all are doing the important work. You're the ones who are actually, on the ground doing the work of helping kids and helping families and, that kind of thing. I am the facilitator. I am the one who's hopefully hearing what you all need to do that work well, and then going to Washington, D.C. and fighting for that, right? That is how I see this role. I am serving you. I am serving the community. I am just a facilitator. I am just hopefully somebody who can go out, and I enjoy this part of it, so I go out, I talk to people, I find out what the good things are that people are doing, how I can help make that happen and make it better and do more of it. And then I will go to Washington, D.C. and work with anybody, and I mean anybody, to try to get that done. And I think that we have lost that in Congress. We are at a place right now where individual representatives won't actually do something that helps the people that they have taken an oath to represent if it means having to work with the other side on anything. And God forbid sharing any credit with the other side. That is not good. That is tearing our country apart. It's divisive, but it's also not working for working people, because what we need is people who will, what I said, go out, the job is just to go out, to talk to people, to figure out how you can try to make lives in your district better, and then you go to Washington and you work with whomever you have to do that work. And I think that's what we need to get back to. I visited a small town some time back, and I met with a member of the city council there. This was fascinating to me. So this woman said to me that they live in a very red Republican area. Okay, it was a small town, very rural, and yet every member of the city council was a Democrat. And I said, how? How is that possible? And she said to me, well, I think it's because on city council, it's not all the national fighting, and you're not, you're fixing the roads, and you're providing for, local things, and and people trust you you're just gonna go out and do that, and it's not part of this national craziness that we have in Washington, D.C. And I've thought a lot about that since she said that. And I think the problem is people have forgotten that Congress is no different, or it shouldn't be. It's a bigger geographic area. The district is bigger than the state of Massachusetts, just so you know. But it's no different in that sense. You're going out and you're just talking to people, and you're figuring out What roads need to be fixed? Where are there childcare deserts? What is happening in our rural and community schools? You know, all of that is still very local. The joke is politics are all local, right? And it's true because it's people in these areas and they need our government to work and they need it to work better. And so for me, that's what this is. I have stood up to my own party many times when I thought that they weren't doing the right thing. And I have worked across the aisle with others in the state legislature to try to get things done, and I want to keep doing that in Congress. And the truth is, what we are talking about here especially really should not be that controversial. You know, it really shouldn't. It's just our kids, you know, and they need us. So thank you for all that you're doing, and you know, I obviously love your support, and I would love to hear from you and see how I can help you as well.
Thank you, and please know that you can call on us anytime too when you find yourself in DC and your staff might need some help or something. Then you know, with a bill,
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
We're available, and then you get lots of content expertise here in the room. So.
Yeah, and as a state legislator, I took a lot of pride in being very, very responsive when people reached out with questions or anything like that, and I will definitely be that same way in Congress. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's great.
Thank you.
Indigent.